Okay. This is a shir on Likutei Sichos, book 27, Chelek of Zayin, Tazria, the portion of Tazria, the second Sicha. In this Sicha, we're going to learn about what it takes to be able to render a judgment on somebody or a statement about somebody that says that they are tamei, says that they are impure. It's not so simple. In life, generally, we're used to being quite, I would say, quite judgmental. We don't think too often, too much. We don't think before we give somebody a telling off or judging them or telling them that they're behaving improperly. The Sikha is going to give us a different perspective, what it takes to truly be able to give Musa, truly be able to tell somebody off. You have to have the capacity to truly love them first. So let's jump in and see where the Rebbe brings it from very clear psukim. Paragraph 1. When it comes to the Tumah of Negoim, the impurity of what is called a nega, so let's, of course, remind ourselves that when it comes to the laws of Metzora, in English, people translate Metzora, Sarat, as leprosy. But of course, leprosy is a disease that existed, still does, I guess it could technically still exist, but that's a physical disease where limbs fall off, which is highly contagious. That is not Sarat that the Torah talks about. Sarat the Torah talks about is a phenomenon that existed at some time in history. The Rambam says it no longer exists. It was a godly phenomenon, a miraculous phenomenon, that if somebody did something that was spiritually inappropriate, primarily, the word mitzorah comes from the extended motzi, shem ra, somebody who spoke negatively about somebody else. This would lead to a gentle sign from heaven that there would be a discoloration of his skin. And that was Miriam. We see it about Miriam. She spoke negatively about Moshe, and then she turns totally white. So this is called the nega, the tumah of negoim, of afflictions. So there's two general laws about the declaration and the kviyut, deciding that the nega, that the affliction is impure. First of all, seeing the nega, in order to be able to decide whether this nega is tamei or not, it needs to be, first of all, through a chacham. It needs to be through somebody who's scholarly and wise, and he knows all of the details. Because we need a teaching from somebody who knows and is fluent, all the names of the afflictions, all the details, the nuances. If you look through the halachas, the exact coloring has to be an exact coloring of white. There are 4 distinct colorings, but if it doesn't meet the criteria of the colors, then it's not tamei. It's a lot of very intricate laws. So you need somebody who's a chacham, who's wise, and knows all the ins and outs, the names and the definitions, and the nuances and details of both the afflictions, the negoim that can come, the discoloration that comes on a person's skin, those that come on clothing, those that come on homes, and that wise person, that very bucky, that expert, doesn't have to be a kohen. Anybody who has the tradition, has been taught by his teachers and has studied it very well to know which negoim are tamei and which are not, has the ability to be the one to look and to make the decision. But hang on, it's only a decision. It's not yet a declaration and a fixing of the status. Because the next halacha, the next point is that hatuma v'hatara tluya b'kohen, that the actual declaration and decision of whether something is tamei or tar, pure or impure, is dependent on the kohen. Even after the expert, wise person who's a non-kohen came and decided that according to all the accumulated knowledge he has, he's a reputable sage, this is going to be an impure situation. However, the person does not become tamei, ritually impure, until the kohen declares that he's tamei. Similarly, even if in the flip side, in the purification process, if they went through the purification process and now, for example, the growth receded or the white hair that made it impure dropped out, and therefore this is a sign that now the nega has been mended and the person can become pure. it needs to be said by a kohen, tahorata, you are tahor, you are pure. If the kohen didn't say it, even if we have empirical knowledge, we know objectively that what's happened on this person's skin discoloration has receded, and now when the kohen looks at it, it's going to be tahor, it's going to be pure. Till the kohen doesn't say it, it does not yet enter the ritual state of beginning purity. So why is it that a kohen, the declaration of a kohen is a stipulation, is a necessary step without which the whole process can either move forward or be taken off? This even applies, listen here, the halacha is in the Rambam, based on the Mishnah in the Tractate of Negoim, afilu kohen she'eino yodea lirot. Kohen who doesn't know how to look at a nega, he never studied it, he's not proficient, doesn't know the ins and outs of the laws. Or even a kohen who's a katan, who's a minor, who's not bar mitzvah. Even is or shoteh, a kohen who's not fully normal, not lo b'deya, he doesn't have a full deck of cards, as they say. Shoteh. He listens to the chacham. The expert in the halachas tells him, hey, whispers to the kohen, says, this is tameh, or this is tar. You should declare this nega either tameh or tar, and the kohen makes that declaration, and based on that declaration that the kohen makes, that's what happens. So clearly, the information needs to be objectively correct. You need a chacham. And at the same time, there's the subjective halacha where the kohen needs to be the one to make that, to call the shots. So here we need an explanation. Since the kohen, in the case where the kohen doesn't even know how to look at it, we're saying he has to rely on the words of the chacham. So why does the kohen have to say it? In other words, if we want to know, usually we would assume that if there's a nega that has a certain size, a certain color, a certain criteria, that means if it says in the Torah that in this circumstance it will be tummy, so it's tummy. I mean, what's the difference if the kohen says or not? If it's an objective reality, why do we need the kohen to say? On the other hand, why is it we understand that obviously we see from the halacha that the kohen needs to be the one to do? Why? Why only in this set of laws do we have this different, new kind of halacha that the kohen is so pivotal and the kohen has to be the one to say it? Okay, well, we could give the simple answer. What's the simple answer? Gzerat HaKatuv. You know what the simple answer always is? Simple answer we can always go to, hello, you don't understand it? Neither do I. That's what he said. The Torah made a decree. That's the way it is. He doesn't have to ask us. He doesn't have to explain to us. That's the way it is. But we know what the Rambam says, that in every halacha, even in the Chukei Torah, which we know that the chukim, the statutes, things like the para aduma, things like shatnez, mixture of wool and linen, which we know there are things that are beyond our understanding. We know that they're called gezeirotem, use language of the Rambam. There are decrees, heavenly decrees. Nonetheless, says the Rambam, in the end of Hilchas Tmura, in the Sefer Hayat, we know the Rambam says that Ra'ui lihitbonen bahem v'chol ma she'ata yachol iten lo tam, ten lo tam. It's appropriate to meditate and contemplate in those halachot which are beyond rationale, and any kind of reason you can find for it, you should try and give a reason. We're looking to have as few as possible things that we don't understand. But generally speaking, Hashem wants us to engage with Him and with His Torah and with the mitzvahs based on our understanding and learn things from them. So it's not just a simple answer, okay, no, I don't know. The kohen, who cares why? Another Gezerat HaKatuv. No. If there's something we can understand about why it would need to be through a kohen, let's understand. Especially, we're talking about the Rambam says, most rov dinei Torah einam ela eitzot. ... Most of the laws of the Torah are counsel, sage advice to us to be able to fix our outlook, be able to have us straighten out our deeds. In other words, these halachot are meant to teach us something about life, about walking in a straight path, but living a more perfected life. So what could we learn for life, for the way we live life in a proper way from this law? Or as the Torah itself says, "Vayitzavenu Hashem." Hashem commanded us lasot et kol hachukim ha'ela, to do all these statutes which we don't understand. Liyir'at Hashem, to fear Hashem. So even in those mitzvot we don't understand, there should be something we can take, a teaching in how to become more God-fearing. So don't just tell me, oh, it's the way it is. No. Let's put on our thinking caps. Let's try and understand, what could this be telling me? Why is it that a kohen is the one that's so pivotal here that needs to make needs to make the declaration? Okay, so let's see. Paragraph 2. The main chiddush here, the main novel concept that the Torah is telling us here, is that the purity and impurity, tumah and tahara, is up to the kohen. You would think that the real news here is not that the kohen needs to be the one to purify it, but that the kohen needs to be the one to be metameh, to say that it's impure. Why is that a bigger chiddush? Why is that a more novel thing that we wouldn't usually understand? Well, think about it. The only way you can need to make a mitzvah tahor, to purify a mitzvah, is if there's first an impurity, right? So we would think that why does the purification of the mitzvah need to be through a kohen? We'll say, well, if the impurity needs to happen through a kohen, so then the purification has to happen through a kohen. So, but really, where does it start? Where's I'm saying here an interesting thing like this. When we want to unravel this mystery, why is it dependent on the kohen? Which part of this mystery, you could say, about the kohen's centrality, which part do we have to figure out? Should we figure out why is it the kohen that's the one to do tahara? Well, you would say, why it's the kohen who has to do tahara? Because it's the kohen who has to do tumah. Yeah. So then it really all starts with the fact that the moment you say the kohen is the one that has to say tameh, it almost follows, not even as a chidush, that obviously if you want to undo the tum'ah, you have to use the same tools that bound it up in impurity. Makes sense to say that those same tools, that same person, that same koach, will be needed to make it pure. So then, why we need a kohen to make it pure? Well, because the kohen made it impure, so we need him to come and undo it. So where's the real question? Why do we need the kohen to say tameh? Now, it's not just a question that comes first. It's actually a question conceptually. They were saying here there's a catch here. The fact that the kohen needs to be involved in the tahara just follows on because the kohen has to be involved in the tumah. Once he has to be involved in the tumah, it makes sense that he has to undo it into the tahara. So we want to know, why does he have to be the one to do the tumah? Now, if we're asking that question, it's actually a much bigger question than just going to the first stage and asking on the first stage instead of asking on the second stage. If you look at tumah and tahara, which would you assume is more connected to a kohen? Which would you say needs a kohen more? If you thought, for example, that only one of them, you'd be given a multiple choice questions. Which process needs a kohen to make the negatome impure, to make it pure? Both. You would go tahara. You would say that why would you say tahara? That the purification process requires a kohen. Because the kohen is the one that brings purity to the people. He's mashpia tahara, the language of the thing. His whole job is to be a conduit, a tzina or a shefa of the flow of holiness. So we can understand. We have a guy who became tameh, became impure with this affliction of tzarat, with the discoloration of the skin, because he's in a bad spiritual. Remember, we said it comes from a bad spiritual state. It's a manifested on the body in the physical way, but it starts from tum'ah, so to speak. This person is now impure. The Kohen, his whole business is to make purity. So of course you need a Kohen to be involved in the tahara. But why on earth do you need a Kohen to be involved in tum'ah? Let me just say it in today, we're reading the headlines from Eretz Yisrael. What is it? Our enemies said that they want to help us put out the fires. You saw that they offered us, some of our enemies. They want to help us put out the fires. We didn't take their help. Why not? Because our enemies are the one lighting the fires. Yeah. God forbid. To light a fire, you don't need much skill. Anybody can wreak havoc. To put out a fire, that you need special people. You're not going to take just anybody.
אולי תפילה של 10,000 נשים וירד גשם והכל.
Yeah.
כן, הרב שמואל אליהו ארגן. מדהים.
Amazing. So the point being, to say tamei, you need a Kohen. Anybody can say tamei. I know a lot of people, they're always screaming, tamei, tamei, tamei. You know when you need a Kohen to say tahor. But that's the question. The halacha is you need a Kohen to say tam. How does that make sense that you need a Kohen to say tamei? So the bigger question is not why do we need a Kohen to say tahor, to say pure? The bigger question is, why do we need a Kohen to be the one to establish tum'ah? Seems anybody could do that. So welcome to the Rebbe's world, Lubavitcher Rebbe's world, where saying tamei is a very, very, very high level thing. So that's us. Paragraph 3. So we could say one of the, and by the way, the Rebbe says in the footnotes that you can look in the Kli Yakar. There's a big speech about why the purification happens through a Kohen. You can look in Chassidus, you can look in Likutei Torah, maybe on Shabbos we'll learn it. Why is it that the Kohen is involved in the Tahara? The Tahara, we get it. The Kohen, he fits. That's the role he fits. Everybody, when you give out in your family, who wants to get dressed up for the Purim play? Everybody wants to be Mordechai. We get it, okay? Mordechai is a good role to dress up as. Who wants to be Haman? Nobody wants to be Haman. Why do we need a Kohen to say Tameh? That's not such a big cover to say Kohen. So it's like this. By the paragraph 3. By the impurity of Mitzvah, we find a chumrah, we find a stringency that's not there by all the other impurities. When a person becomes impure, usually he has to go through the process of the mikveh, he has to go through, even if he becomes impure to a dead body, the highest form of tum'ah, he considered home, he can't go into the Beis HaMikdash. He doesn't have to leave his city. Here, when it comes to a mitzvah, somebody who had this, if he becomes impure with the impurity of tzarat, the Torah says about him, Badad yeshev michutz lamachaneh mashavo. He has to sit in a state of being forlorn, alone, outside the camp. In the equivalent, in the Torah, it's talking about the camp, the 3 camps. But in the equivalent, once they moved into Eretz Yisrael, that would mean not being allowed to be in a walled city. He would have to leave Yerushalayim. And Mitzvah couldn't be in Yerushalayim. He had to be outside the wall. That means, and not just that, he wouldn't even be in a camp with other people that are impure at a different level. In other words, he was in a situation where he was quarantined, basically. That's not a good situation to be. And that, by the way, is not just the physical reality he has to live with. He has to contend with living outside the camp. This is also what the spiritual statement is about this person, that he's so impure that he's not even able to be in the camp of holiness. It's like Am Yisrael, which is a holy nation, can't contain such an impure person. It's total rejection. But this, the Torah says, who can say about a Jew that he has to be totally rejected? Remember, you're not just deciding, oh, okay, why don't you hang out and, drink coffee with your friends for a few days to calm down. We're telling you have to go outside the city. You're a reject. You have such a high level of tumah. Until things start receding, we got to put you outside all alone for 7 days. Who can make such a harsh, I wouldn't say harsh, it's harsh. Who can make such a high level decision? Only a Kohen. That's what the Torah says. You want to be able to tell a Jew out, you need to be a Kohen. Why? Because a Kohen, his job is levarech et amo Yisrael bi'ahava. For the Kohen, make a bracha before they bless us. Those that are in Eretz Yisrael, particularly for Sfardim all around the world, they get to hear it every day, and on Shabbos twice. Ashkenazim only get to hear it on Chutz La'aretz, at least only get to hear it on Yom Tov. But when we get to hear the bracha, it's a fantastic bracha. And because we only hear it so seldom in Chutz La'aretz, we really, really appreciate it. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu Yisrael. The Kohanim say in unison, Asher Kedishanu. Oh, we have a Kohen here. Tzivanu levarech et amo Yisrael. Hashem, we thank Hashem for the commandment He gave us Kohanim. Levarech et amo Yisrael, to bless the people be'ahava, with love. Why? Because a Kohen is considered Isha Chesed, a person of Chesed. I want to quote a halacha in Shulchan Aruch. The Rebbe quotes here how the blessing that he gives needs to be with love. Here is a halacha quoting the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, laws of Nisiyat Kapayim, laws of Birkat Kohanim, Siman Kuf Chav Chet. See if you 30 writes like this: Shnei Kohanim asoneim ze et ze. If you have two Kohanim that can't stand each other, utarim lalot biyachad, they're allowed to go up and bless the Jewish people together. That's okay. However, Kohen asone tatzibur. If a Kohen hates the community, he's being asked to go and bless. Oh, hatzibur sonimoto, all the people detest him. Sakanahi la Kohen im yisait kapav. It's a danger to the Kohen if he goes up and blesses the people. V'lachen yetzeh mipnei takneset. Better go out of the shul, because you can't be in the shul, and when you're called up, you don't come up. It seems like you're not a Kohen. But leave shul. Why? The Zohar says it's a sakana. It's based on the Zohar. It's dangerous to bless when you don't really mean to bless, or when you're blessing and the people don't like you, they hate you. That's why even in the bracha we say, Hashem commanded us to bless the Jewish people with love. The Kohen has to be to be a Kohen, to function as a Kohen, has to be with love. By the way, I know somebody who's a Kohen, hot-headed, and once in a while he leaves the shul for Birkat Kohanim. He says, today I'm not able to muster he's Sephardi, so it's a daily thing. So you could understand maybe one day he had he's hot-headed, he told somebody off, and now he there's a little bit of an animosity in the shul. So for today he wants to cool off and he leaves the shul, he doesn't say the bracha Kohanim. The Kohen, his higher stature, part of his role is to be the one to transmit the blessing from Hashem to the people, but the keli for that blessing, the costume for that blessing, the conductor for that blessing is ava, is love. So the Kohen by definition is chesed, is love, and therefore Hashem says, I want the Kohen, the person of love, the person for whom it's so difficult to say this. He's not going to say Tameh just callously. I can't stand the guy. Tameh, you're impure. Hey, that's not a Kohen. That's not a Kohen who's allowed to work. Kohen has to be with love. He has to look, and if he says Tameh, it's Tameh. According to this, says the Rebbe in a square brackets, when we look at the continuation of the pasuk in Parshat Shoftim in Dvarim, it says that HaKohanim, they are bam bachar Hashem Elokecha l'shareto. Hashem chose the Kohanim to serve Him, ulevarech b'shem Hashem, and to bless in the name of Hashem. And then it says, the next thing it says, they're chosen to bless. Remember, we said blessing comes through love. The next thing it says, after they're in charge of blessing, it says, and through their mouth will come every quarrel and every decision about a nega, about a purity and impurity of this discoloration. Because Hashem, in other words, you see the pasuk says it openly. Hashem chose them levarech, to bless. That's why they're the ones who decide when there's Tumah and Ta'ara in this case of a mitzvah. So of course, we're not saying that the Kohen, God forbid, is allowed to or is going to whitewash and not paskin, not say the psak halacha, decide the halacha objectively the way the Torah tells him the way it is. No. That's why, remember, we said the chacham if the Kohen is not a Baki, if the Kohen is not a Chacham, not a wise sage who knows the halachot, he needs to bring with him a Chacham to take a look and say objectively what is the story here. And this Chacham needs to be with the tradition of Pi Rabo. He needs to have studied at the feet of somebody greater than him, who's higher up than him in the chain of transmission. He knows it's from Moshe to Sinai. However, when it comes to actually saying what is the status of this person who's standing in front of you, it has to be through a person who represents the ultimate of chesed, of kindness. Because only that kind of person will feel the full stringency. He'll have empathy. He'll feel the impact of what he's about to do. He's going to now declare another Jew impure. And he's not going to spare any toil. And he's not going to let the Chacham just say easily, callously, yeah, he's impure. He's going to say, you sure? Take a look. Because he feels empathetically, what are we going to do with this person? We're not going to just throw him out of the can. And therefore, if he because of his insistence that we have to go easy and we have to see, there's a concept that v'shafetu ha'eda, the Beis Din can sometimes go back and forth in trying to judge, but then the v'hitzilu ha'eda, that sometimes there's room to look for a way where the Sanhedrin, the Beis Din, can find ways to save the individual. In other words, if this person really cares about the other person, he'll get the Chacham to make an extra effort. It says here that I have a fascinating law of psychology, really, in the square brackets. Al derech hayadut is similar to what is known, that when we talk about Ein Chacham Kebal HaNisayon, there's no one smarter than somebody with experience. Why is that? You see, when you actually have to, there's a concept. Somebody will be teaching halacha. If Reuben comes and does this, then Shimon does this, then that's taught hypothetically. Now, when the question comes before the Rab, now he has to actually say, who does it belong to? What he learned before was just in the world of hypothesis. Now, he needs to actually bring it down into the world of deed, into an action. Are you going to take the item and take it from this person to that person? It's really that person. But now we have to think about it again. So somebody experience means it's already come down into the world of actualization. And before you decide something, and when it's actually relevant now, you treat it totally different. You know, there's a story. The person who was lecturing, it's a real story apparently. A guy who was a Rosh Yeshiva, but he also had business dealings, and he had a big investment. They borrowed a lot of money, and he sent out ships all over the world to bring back a certain commodity. And they found out his ships were lost at sea. He became a poor man overnight, but they didn't know how to tell him. So they asked him to teach the halacha, which says you have to thank Hashem. The pasuk. Anyway, anything that happens to you, you have to thank Hashem for the bad, just like for the good. And he starts to teach us, thank Hashem for the bad, just like for the good. And they ask him, sure, yeah, you have to dance, yeah. Imagine if all your merchant vessels, you discovered they were all lost at sea, and now you owe them money, and there's no way to make it back. Would you still dance? He says, yeah, you have to thank Hashem for them. So they said, okay, so start dancing. When he realized what they were telling him, he fainted. When he came to, he said, I guess I didn't really understand. I thought I understood. I guess I didn't understand. You can understand something conceptually. When it comes to an actual implementation, when you're standing in front, you actually have to do it. That's something else. So here too, when you talk about when you're talking the kohen, in other words, even in paskening, it turns out, when somebody comes and asks a halacha, how you're going to look at it, how much you're going to put yourself into it to try and find a way to somehow not bend the truth, but see it in a way where every avenue that maybe you could use to try and see this person in a better light, the one that will do that most is the one that's most empathetic, the one that has most chesed, the one that's the most has the most love. That's the Kohen. So even if he doesn't know himself, but he has the chacham, but he'll think he will. His presence there will motivate the chacham to look at it in a much more kind way. After the Kohen has gone through the process, if he says Tameh, then you know for sure. You know, it's okay. That's the Kohen. And for sure, when it comes to purifying the thing, you know he's going to make every effort to make him pure. So you have the highest level of, I would say, mitgefil, of empathy, of possible when the Kohen is the one involved in the thing. What will you ask me? You can ask me though, what about if we said even if the Kohen is a katan or a shoteh, even if he's not bar mitzvah or he's not fully normal, how could the Kohen be of help then? But what kind of chesed does he represent? So says the Rebbe, because still in all, the concept is still there, that when you bring it, the psak din into the world, it has to come through the place of chesed. Usually, this will actually play out. Usually the Kohen won't be a katan, won't be a shoteh. The Kohen may actually be the chacham himself. That's the best. And therefore, he'll look at it from the perspective of not relegating this person to Badad Yeshev callously, easily, without a lot of thought. Paragraph 4 here. Now we go to the teaching for us. What's the teaching? By the way, the Rebbe points out here in her footnote 28, just to point out, listen to this. Chelek alma mitzvah letaro. According to all opinions, there's a mitzvah to try and purify the mitzvah if he was tamei. Not according to all opinions is there a mitzvah tasei letameo, to make him tamei. It's just an interesting concept. It could be the mitzvah is really the tara. Of course, there's a halacha of tumah, but interesting. I would have to look it up to see exactly what the point is, but I think we got the gist.
מה היחס בין טהרה לתשובה?
Connection between tahara and tshuva. So in our case of mitzvah, because the tahara is coming from a place where it's coming from motzi shemra, it's coming from a chet. So the tumah, the impurity, is connected with a spiritual decline, and therefore the tahara is a sign that he's been rehabilitated, does teshuvah, and therefore Hashem can take away that sign and bring him back into the camp.
צריך לעשות משהו אקטיבי, ואז זה משתנה.
What we assume is that the Badad Yeshev sitting alone outside the tent will create the contemplation, the Inbonenut, that will help him rehabilitate himself. Paragraph 4. Here we have the teaching, you see, and this is classic Lubavitcher Rebbe, our generation. You see something not good, God forbid, by another Jew, and it even looks to be that he's in such a low situation, like a Mitzvah, that he's removed himself from the community, and he's done things, and he's reached such a stage where, God forbid, he's not even worthy to be part of the community. That's how far, that's how bad, that's how impure it's become. Says the Torah, even if the person looking at him is a Chacham Gadol, a big sage, knows the whole Torah, and when he looks from the glasses of Torah, the glasses of the wisdom of Torah, this person should be ejected from all the camps. He doesn't belong. He's done something so bad. He's reached such a low level. But before you can give out a psak din like that, before you can decide to eject, God forbid, another Jew outside the community, first you have to good evaluate yourself. Are you being a kohen? Are you full of chesed, of kindness? Are you motivated by Ahavat Yisrael? And if, God forbid, you find by yourself that you don't have true Ahavat Yisrael, love of your fellow, so you don't have the status of a kohen, you don't have the right to decide about this other Jew that he needs to be ejected. It could be that what you're seeing is not coming from truth, not from pure truth. You know what it could be coming? Could be coming because you have unrefinedness within yourself. You're seeing in the other person the frustrations and the unrefinedness through which you're viewing him. That's something in your eyes that needs to be cleansed. So the Torah says like this, that the nega, fascinating, the nega itself is not an objective tumah. It's not, you see, if I have a space, I have a wire. If I touch the wire, there's electricity. It's going to, God forbid, it's not good. Whether the electrician came and said it's a live wire or the electrician didn't come and say it's a live wire, doesn't make a difference. It's a live wire. No, but how do you know? You said it's a live wire. The electrician didn't say it. Hello, you can try. I said it's a live wire. If you touch it, you'll know. No, but the electrician didn't say I could touch. Okay, you can touch it, but it's an objective reality. The nega comes out that this nega is not an objective reality. So the chacham would say, look, he's doing this and this. What's the difference who I am? Take a sargel, take a ruler. You rule. He went 2 meters this way, went 2 meters that means he's disqualified. He did something bad. He's so un-Jewish. He's cut off. We've got to throw him out. The point with the nega is no, it's not an objective reality. It's once it's decided, once it's been proclaimed. You need a kohen though to proclaim tameata. It's the kohen's uttering that it's tameh that creates the reality which ejects him. So which means to say, if somebody who's a non-kohen, who's not fully a person of chesed, comes and says about another person, you need to be ejected, you need to be outside the camp. You know what he's saying? It's sheker. Look at Rabbi gives you he says, 1 second. Who's allowed to make the judgment if the person has to leave the camp? The Kohen. If you're not a Kohen, if you're not at the darga, the level of Ahavat Yisrael, and you come and say about that guy, he's got to go out, you're saying false. Who are you to say? Because you're not the guy who can say it. When you say out, that's a falsehood. You're saying he needs to be out, but that's not true. 1 second. So you just said something not true, which means you're just like a mitzvah. You're the guy who's being a motzi shemra. You're the guy who deserves now, who's the real tainted person. 1 second. So you're not just speaking lashon hara about a second person. You're actually, you see, lashon hara can sometimes be saying the truth. But here you're actually saying sheker. It's even worse. You're saying something false about the person. You said he's an objective outcast. Outcasts are not objective. You need a Kohen to say you're not a Kohen. So you're saying he's an outcast. That's not true. So now you're the liar. You're saying something untrue about him. 1 second. You know what happens to liars. That's exactly classic Mitzorah. You're calling him a Mitzorah. He has to go out. You actually just proved that you're the Mitzorah. So what should you do? What do we do to a Mitzorah? And what do we do if we've seen somebody and we've said harsh things about somebody and we've ejected somebody, and now the Rebbe tells us, look at a mirror, you're the actual problem. What do you do? To sit outside the camp. You sit alone outside the camp. Till, what's the process? It's not punitive. It's rehabilitative. It's in order to have the person meditate and contemplate and understand this is what it feels like to be ejected. Let me learn how to look at other Jews in a much more positive eye without the criticalness that I used to have. And let me separate myself for a little while and have that time out to be able to, first of all, not disturb other people with my negativity. You can't, if it's too hot in the kitchen, they say, leave the kitchen. If you can't handle being around people and not shutting your mouth and not being critical, you need some time out. You're going to be the one who's projecting negativity onto others, then you're actually the negative one. But by sitting outside and a little bit, getting yourself away from others, not getting into trouble, thinking about how to try and start looking at others in a positive way, how to become a Kohen, that will actually heal you. Be able to have the Shav V'Rafalo, be able to have Teshuvah, come back to Hashem, and he'll be healed. You see here the healing and the Tumah, the Tara, the coming back to Hashem. It's all interconnected. Through a behavior of Ahavat Yisrael, true Ahavat Yisrael, in a way that we call it Ahavat Chinam. Ahavat Chinam means love without any reason. That cancels out the hatred that we say led to the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. Sinat Chilam. Sinat Chilam means hatred without any reason, not because somebody did something, just because you can't stand the space that somebody else takes out, which very often is the source of a lot of rivalry. But anyway, we cancel that by having love that's just free, not based on anything. In other words, open. How do you call it? Ahavat Chinam. Love that's not hinged on any reason, rather just because you understand that there's a piece of Hashem in the other person, and so on.
Unconditional.
Unconditional love. Thank you. That brings the ultimate revelation of Mashiach, the Gula Mitzvah Shlema, the complete and the truthful redemption through Mashiach speedily in our days. That is the Sikha.